Today on the Video Maker Podcast, we talk all about lighting. Actually, we had a lot to talk about related to lighting, and we only got to about half of it. So, we talked about the importance of lighting and how really essential it is to creating great video. We talk about the basic techniques of lighting and also its purpose for more advanced usage. We also get into kind of the physics of light and how it interacts with shadows and the camera. As always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, we'd love it if you went to iTunes and gave us a 5-star review. And while you're there, if you hit the subscribe button, that'd be really helpful for us and probably more convenient to you. We release the podcast every Monday morning at 5 a.m. Pacific time. So if you don't want to get up at 5 a.m. to hit the download button, hit the subscribe button. It'll be there when you wake up. Okay, so enough of that. Let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Video Maker Podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, as always, to my left is Haley LaPlante.
Hi.
And to my right is Chris Monlux.
Hello.
And today's topic is lighting. And, let's see, Susan came up with this idea. Susan is our art director, came up with this idea earlier today when we were trying to figure out what are we going to talk about in today's podcast. And I was astonished that we haven't had a lighting podcast so far.
I guess we've talked about we've had a gaffer on and we've talked about light, but nothing with the lighting as the main topic.
That's right.
Although I think last week we were talking about color and we were talking a lot about lighting and that. So I think it just gets thrown in there because it's so important.
Yeah, it is, and this is really one of these fundamental topics, disciplines of image making. That there's no way we're going to cover everything there is to cover in just this 1 hour conversation.
Totally.
But we will do our best, I guess. I was watching some YouTube video recently and an ad came on. I don't remember what the ad was for, but at any rate, it was for something related to video production and filmmaking, and it started off by saying, if you really want to improve your videos, focus on lighting first before anything else. And I don't know, I really believe that to be true. And maybe I'm wrong here, maybe that you really should learn the rule of thirds and how to expose an image first. But really lighting is so essential and so many people don't, know how to do it. And when I say people, I mean, a lot of professionals don't really know much about artificial lighting.
Totally.
And I don't know if that's because of access to the equipment, or just a lack of knowledge or both. But it's certainly the case that as soon as you have a grasp of lighting and you have the time and maybe luxury, I guess, to spend time setting up lights for a shoot, the value of your production will just shoot through the roof.
Totally. I think the one of the big reasons why the lighting hasn't made into a lot of at least small teams and that kind of thing is because access to good lights, one, they're expensive and it's hard to justify money on lights, but that we used to need to buy 1K light. Now we have dimmable lights. We have lights that are not as expensive as they're not $10,000. They're a couple $1,000s, so they're more approachable now. So someone could have learned a bunch of lighting on their own, but it's unlikely you spent 20-30 grand and didn't know what you were doing with buying good lights or whatever. So it's good to the application of it is, I think, a really good practice of composition though. When you're working on lighting, you're trying to be deliberate about your scene, yet you're getting to see everything out of frame as well. So getting to try to figure out how you want to contour somebody with shaping them with the light and what mood you want to get. There can be a lot of thought into that. Just recently I've been shooting a bunch of products, and it's I'll be lighting for 20-30 minutes, getting everything all set up for a shot that's going to take for a 15-second shot. And it's just, if you want it to look really good, it's got to be, especially for product lighting, because everything needs to be just there. If the product itself is not really dynamic, you got to make it dynamic with the lighting or with the camera movement. The access to these professional lighting tools have just been getting more affordable and available for small 2-3 teams, single one person show type of thing. And the thing is if you don't know how to use this stuff, it's pretty useless. I know for a long time when I was shooting commercials, is there enough light? Well, is there noise in the image? No. Okay, cool. We got enough light. We're good. We weren't lighting for anything other than to get enough light that the image might look nice. It wasn't that we were just trying to illuminate. We weren't trying to actually contour or do anything with that light.
Well, yeah, and also just the nature of those types of productions are quite a bit different than, for example, like what we're doing here. So in this room, there's 3 of us, and there's 8 active lights on right now, right?
Yep.
And these lights took, boy, how long, Chris? How long did it take to set up and configure these lights as they are the first time that you set them up? Got to be a couple hours, right?
Yeah, I mean, I needed to have someone sit down, and and a lot of times you got to see what through the camera and whatnot, and and like where they're at. So the biggest thing we had a problem with is color temperature, because although all of our soft lights are all bicolor, so they can range in their color temperature. But our Fresnels, which are focusable hard lights, they're all set at 5000K. So I had to match all of our soft lights to match that color temperature, and unfortunately on them they're not terribly accurate. It's kind of a dial, and there's notches, but it doesn't tell you what's between those notches. So I actually had to get a light meter out and make sure I had them all at the same color temperature, so then when we set our cameras at that color temperature, it would look right. So I had to do all that. Then it was all about putting them in the right direction and where they're going to go and that kind of thing, how much intensity they need, what they're doing. And for me, especially when I'm trying to light this is a difficult one. So we have 3 cameras. We have a lot of things that we're trying not to get in the shot. We're trying not to give anybody unflattering shadows, yet we're lighting with a lot of soft light that everybody's getting scattered with. So there's a lot of issues that are with that, but it was just all about, okay, put it there. And it's amazing how a little movement, be like, okay, I'm going to move this down an inch. Oh, perfect. Or having on all of our hard lights, they'll have barn doors, which is, flaps that'll block light. So being able to actually make it so that the light doesn't spill onto places you don't want to, so you don't get the long shadows on your face or whatnot. I think I'm spewing jargon right now, just lots and lots of it.
Yeah, Haley's got a new sound effect for when Chris talks too much, right?
Yeah, what's the sound effect? She's got to look at her cheat sheet.
Boring!
That's how she feels about it.
But
I would say, it was 3-4 hours, and then I still spend 20 minutes maybe before doing a shoot to make sure if I have moved any of the lights, making sure they're generally in the same area. And I try not to move as many as I possibly can when I'm doing other shooting and stuff.
So for the setup that we have here, these we have 3 cameras in this room, so that's considered 3 setups. So setup is, like in filmmaking terms, is when where are you placing your camera and where the lights go. That's a setup. And so we have 3 here. It took a couple hours, I guess, to get all the lights configured for 3 setups simultaneously. When we're talking about commercials, especially the type of commercials that you and I did, the whole shoot is 4 hours maybe.
Yeah, right.
And you might have 20 setups. Like, you're really on the move. You're moving the camera constantly, pointing it in different directions, trying to get all these different things. So the idea that you're going to get 20 setups with, nice artificial lighting for each one in 4 hours is just like, it's a fantasy.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know how many times I was just happy that the ceiling was white, so I could just bounce all of our light off the ceiling, and then everything in the scene would be nice, soft light. And okay, it's illuminated, good. Don't have any shadows to deal with. But a lot of times, if your scene got big enough, it was like, okay, I'm gonna light the subject, and hopefully everything else in the room's bright enough. I remember shooting a furniture commercial. It was like we were showing all of the deals and the rows of couches they had, and it was like the oldest building ever with like 2 or 3 outlets in the whole entire building that worked. And like there's a corner that the fluorescent light is out, so it was like this back corner is all dark, like the boogeyman was back there, and they're trying to talk about sale. It was very difficult to try to deal with that. How do you do a big wide shot and not get the lights in it and everything?
Yeah, so in a situation where we have a studio and most of the shots, the setups are kind of the same. Like the setup that I'm at now with the camera in that position with these lights, we use for a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And so we can afford to spend several hours to get the lighting just right on it. And as a result, the shot looks really good, like all the time. And it's easy to look at that and go, boy, why don't we have that for everything?
Yeah.
And it really comes down to that fact that, well, each setup, you're going to spend 2 hours per setup getting everything right? And the answer usually is no if your video is very dynamic and shooting in a lot of places. Haley's working on an article now about lighting for YouTube, and we have to assume that YouTubers are basically in the same spot, right, Haley? Like the idea that we're talking about vloggers or cooking channels or whatever, where from video to video, they kind of have the same setup.
Right.
And a lot of YouTubers don't do that. They might, take their camera out on the go. But those types of YouTubers who are out on the go, no one really expects them to have like really nice professional lighting for every shot. Whereas having nice professional lighting for a YouTuber in their typical setup with their vlogging setup or their cooking setup or their beauty setup or whatever, high quality lighting really is within their grasp to have that for every video. And so it's worth it to invest the time to learn the tactics and to get the right equipment if you're going to be like shooting the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, we wouldn't spend the time to light this studio if it wasn't like these are staying this way, so we can sit down and turnkey go. If this was a studio that was like an active studio, otherwise, all the lights would be against the wall, and every time you had a shoot, you'd set up for those scenes you're lighting for. You'd set them up, then you'd break everything down, and everything would go away, and that is just very time consuming. The cool thing is, I think, is that cameras are becoming more sensitive. So going out and being in places where you don't have control of the light, that there are that you can get really nice shots. Because I was going to say, Mike, I've gotten lots of very, very beautiful shots that I didn't work on the lighting at all. But I'd have to say that it was because I was lucky. It was because I was in the right place at the right time, and so there was a element of luck in how nice that shot is, versus like going, okay, I have this thing I need to do and I need to achieve it. That's much more difficult to do because you have to actually get it that way, and there's a lot of things to have to fight when it comes to lighting a scene. In our building here, or at least in the studio, there's no windows here. The worst we have is a big gap in the door over here that sometimes the sun shines through. But we can get it completely dark, so we have complete control over sound, audio, lighting. Sound and audio, those are different, right? And so we can have all this control. If we just step out of the room, we're in a big room that has lots of windows. And, throughout the year, not only is the direction of the sun different, but also the color temperature changes throughout the day, depending on the thing. So depending on the part of the building you're shooting in or whatever. So it can be very difficult to have to set those up. And I know, like, I've done a couple videos where I'm all out there and, man, I'm busting my butt just to, like, get lights in the scene, let alone, like, making them look really good. And that's why, you have a specific job, on a movie set of someone doing that, because, like, I mean, really, the actors are ready to act. Usually the shooter's ready to shoot, but you got to get the scene set up, and it just takes time. I mean, a lot of times, the gaffers are there well before a scene's being shot so that they're ready to walk right on. But, you do one or two scenes, maybe you try to get some coverage, but then they're, completely breaking down. Whereas we try to keep it as simple as possible. When I'm shooting B-roll, I'm shooting it in the same place. When I'm shooting, we're shooting A-roll, we're shooting in the same place. So that really helps for this. But I think we're jumping in a little too deep here. So what would you say, Mike, is the reason for lighting versus like going with the in vogue natural lighting look?
What's the reason for it?
Why would I not just position myself in the room where I had used the sun to look pretty good versus like lighting the whole scene up with artificial light?
Well, I mean, I think if you're considering like what is the primary purpose of lighting, it's really, I mean, at its most basic level, we're talking about providing enough brightness in the shot so that your camera can properly expose, and sort of secondary to that is to make sure that the shot is clear and able to, you can clearly understand what you're looking at. So, for example, if you're shooting outdoors in the sunlight and it's noon, and you've got a person on screen, they're going to have like these really intense shadows because of the contrast between where the sun hits a person's face and the shadow that's cast under their eyes or under their chin or past their nose. That contrast is really intense.
Yeah.
And that combined with the contrast of whatever's happening in the background, like you have some trees or a car or a building or whatever, you're also getting these very intense shadows. And as a result, the image itself, it's possible that it's just not going to be very clear. It's not going to be easy to look at if it's on screen for a split second, for example. It's just a very noisy thing. So sort of jumping back, really, we're talking about the first thing is make sure that the camera can pick up what it's supposed to pick up.
It's getting enough light to expose properly on your subject.
Yep. And then secondly is make sure that it's lit in such a way that a viewer can quickly see what they're supposed to see. And that really comes down to what are the shadows like. I have read that lighting is really the art of placing shadows. And I believe that it's true outside of just providing enough luminance for a camera to be able to see what it's supposed to see.
Sure.
But it's really that. And even if you go down to 3-point lighting setup, it really is about placing shadows, illuminating the face in such a way that shadows are placed in a way that provides some texture and shape to a person's face without having so much contrast that it's difficult to actually see, and to provide some contrast and separation between the subject on screen and the background behind them.
Yeah, the high noon example, there's ample light, right? But it's straight up, so you're getting long shadows from the nose down. What's that going to do? It's going to be unflattering, regardless of how beautiful the person is. It's going to be unflattering to have a big giant shadow under your nose. It's going to make your nose look larger. Same with your wells of your eyes, going to make them look tired. So there's a lot of like mood that's set from your lighting, and so sometimes you're trying to just control the shadows, like in the way of like, how do I get rid of these shadows? So sometimes if you're lighting with the sun, you're going, okay, how do I get light in those places that have shadows? So you're trying to place light to get rid of that. So you might actually be doing that without a light specifically, but like a white card or some kind of, or a reflector or something like that, or you're trying to control the light. And obviously, how do you control the sun? You escape the sun. You don't really control the sun. Now you can, shade and do that kind of thing, but you'll see that a lot in news, that they'll shade their interviewer and interviewee, but then you'll notice the background's just super bright, and it's because they're in shadow and the sun in the background's in full sun, and so that contrast is really hard. So you're trying to make it so that contrast isn't as much, like just what Mike was saying, that contrast. So, but a lot of times it's just in the effort to control those shadows. So if you're trying to make a dramatic scene, you can't have someone all like beautifully evenly lit, looking like they're ready to spin the wheel on the Wheel of Fortune or something. It's going to have a happy mood looking, and when you wanting to have it dramatic or moody or of some sort. So
there are exceptions, of course, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
And I was just thinking of Haley's favorite movie, Braveheart.
Braveheart,
which the most dramatic scenes are outdoors under overcast skies, where I don't believe actually, while you're talking, Chris, I was looking up some behind the scenes stuff for Braveheart. That was like basically all natural lighting.
Oh, it had to be. I mean, it's such a huge scene. Don't get me wrong. I guarantee you they had some really bright lights to make it so Mel Gibson really stood out when they're having a fight, some kind of thing. I guarantee you that they were following him, the subject matter of the scene, but the greater scene as a whole. I mean, talk about a difficult thing to see. I mean, even to light this space, is a lot of lights. Just think about if you're doing that and you're fighting the sun. It's the brightest light that we have. So it's definitely a difficult thing to achieve. But you can start with the basics. And so in this room, to get lit for these different setups, I started with darkness, and I started with the 3-point lighting. So 3-point lighting is three three different lights that are trying to do three different things. One being your main source, which is your key light. And then the next is your fill light, which is just to control the shadows created by your key light. And then you have your backlight, and your backlight's just helping separate your subject from the background. And so I was doing one at a time. So I'd set up my key light. Okay, is this where I want light to be coming from? Cool. Subject looks pretty good. Okay, now I want to turn on my fill, and I want to bring up its intensity until I have the amount of shadows that I want on their face. And then the background light, the rim light to separate them, that's really the thing that's giving contour. So right now it's not real apparent. I think if I moved it, well, actually I moved, the light doesn't move with me, but that our shoulders have some light on them, and it's not because we just have so much spill, it's because we actually have lights pointing on us to get our rim around us, to get the edge of our shoulders and our heads and everything. And this gets really difficult when you have like shared space. So obviously the light that is Mike's key is spilling on me somewhere, some way. I'm not sure how much, but I would be illuminated if I turned off all the lights that were specifically on here for me. Now I'd be a lot darker than everybody else, but that's part of the process. So dealing with lighting a scene, I always go to 3-point lighting first. Okay, how do I apply 3-point lighting in the scene? It might be I want to know where the light source would be from the scene. So if I'm emulating the sun, or I'm emulating a window, or a lamp, or anything like that, okay, cool, that's where my lighting source is. And then the others are to solve the problems that are created by that. And so you can address those really pretty simply just by doing that. Now the cool thing is sometimes you get lucky and you place lights and you turn them on and it's like, oh, that works. I mean, I moved quite a few of these lights that we're using right now earlier today when I was shooting, and I don't have them marked, although that'd be smart to do, of how they should be set up normally. And I just was like, oh, I think this is about right. And I set it up before, and sure enough, we all sat down. It looks pretty good. I mean, could it be better? Sure. It'd always be better, I guess. But, it's just making sure you're achieving what you're trying to achieve. And that's the whole thing about filmmaking, is why that was my trick question to you, Mike, is like, why do you illuminate? Is to tell your story. You want to tell your story the best way. So how do you support your story? Well, by lighting your subjects so that people can see them, but also to convey mood and all the rest, those feelings that you're going to have that hopefully your viewer will never be aware of or ever thinking about. If your audience, if your viewer is thinking about your lighting, likely the scene's not lit well, or they're like a nerd and they're studying your lighting.
So I would disagree with you a little bit here, Chris, which is that if we're talking about what is the purpose of lighting, maybe the answer to your trick question is there is not a singular purpose.
No, totally.
And that the idea of using light to tell a story is really kind of like advanced lighting, right?
Oh, totally.
So you can tell a story without any artificial light, or you can tell a story just with pure natural, smooth lighting through the whole thing, and still be dramatic. Braveheart proves that, right?
Totally.
There's like a couple of scenes where it's dark, but very few.
But even like the most dramatic scene in the film, right at the very end, when he's they put him on the rack or something, right?
Broad daylight.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Just whatever was outside. Like that's kind of what it was.
I think that scene's interesting because they go back and forth. Like William Wallace is being tortured, but then they go to Longshanks, and he's in his room dying, and it's kind of dark and so going back and forth between those two.
Yeah. Well, although, and if we look at these big war scenes that have come out since, we see a lot more kind of dramatic things happening. So maybe we could look at Lord of the Rings as was a film that came out a few years later. That now these movies are happening, or these battle scenes are happening at night. And they're lit by the moonlight or something, What was the other one? Game of Thrones kind of did the same thing. They had this in this that scene where it took place in this muddy field or something, and Jon Snow got dogpiled by all these dudes. It was like this really gritty, high contrast thing. The same thing with Saving Private Ryan when they're storming the beach was very high contrast.
Yeah. And sometimes the thing about the lighting, I mean, the dark scenes, you'd be amazed at how many lights it takes to light up a dark scene. And it's usually because you have to be really deliberate, right? It's easy to just throw a bunch of light on and get enough light, but using it to convey a message that is totally advanced lighting. But it's more of my point of like all of the tools are hopefully to help you make your story better. Like, it's not that your story's bad to begin with. It's just applying advanced knowledge in this case will help edify your story or lift up certain points or help make them easier for the audience to get or what have you. But I think that, I mean, if you're thinking about that, if you're shooting your first thing and you're just trying to get lit, I think it's get lit. I think that
is that a song?
It's got to be.
I don't think so.
It's Blitz. I'm thinking of It's Blitz.
It's Blitz.
What was that? Anyways.
I was thinking of a really interesting example of lighting from Quentin Tarantino is Django Unchained.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh.
After the big massacre scene, like at the end, and they have Jamie Foxx, and it's like at night, but there's an oil lamp. It's supposed to be an oil lamp, I think, that's over his head, but there's no way you'd get that much light.
Yeah, never with
so the way Tarantino uses the light to portray the oil lamp, but it's not actually.
Totally.
Yeah, and just about any movie where they have a lamp or a candle or something.
Yeah.
I always like it when they turned off the light. It's like, oh, good night, honey. And all of a sudden they turn off this one bedside table light, and then the whole room is completely dark. And it was like perfectly lit before. It's like, wow, that's pretty
a powerful candle.
Yeah, totally. Well, the cool thing is about some new lights. So I have a couple over here actually that are RGB lights, but they also have some the RGBWs. So you can they can be different colors. So they actually have one that's like a police light. So you could put it outside, so it looks like the cops are here. So the light to be reflecting off of things. You'd be like, oh, it seems like the lighting bar on a police car. Or they have TV flicker. They have like lightning, and that actually accidentally turned on the lightning, and I just about had a stroke. It freaked me out. I was like, and I couldn't see the screen to turn it off, and it was in my eyes. But it's really impactful when you use those lights that way, like trying to emulate those real lights. So I imagine in that scene with Jamie Foxx in Django Unchained, like the color temperature of that light had to be warmer. A daylight light would not work in that scene. I mean, you could, but the skin tones wouldn't look right and that kind of thing. So you have to use the right color temperature to be able to convey a fire versus, the headlights of a new car or an old car that has, more incandescent light bulbs, or just the different color temperatures actually scream like era and genre sometimes. But like era, totally like blue light. I remember my grandfather really disliking blue lights, like fluorescent lights. They need to be warm.
Yeah, for your house,
Yeah, exactly what he was. Yeah, he changed all his bulbs thinking, I'm going to save a bunch of energy, and then he hated the vibe in his house.
Yeah,
that's what he said to me. I hate the vibe in here. 90-year-old man.
We should circle back to light, the physics of light, because I do want to talk about.
Oh yeah, that's like one of our first points that we should have been talking about.
But regarding, let's see what the lamp in Django. If they put a daylight colored light behind that, it would not look especially strange because the lamp itself is actually giving off a little bit of light. Even if they have another light behind it, like enhancing it, the lamp is going to give off a very warm color temperature from this blue flame, this flame, and then the light behind it, if it's daylight color, is going to be very blue, and they're just going to be like, what's going on here? These don't match. It's like holding the green lightsaber and everything being lit up red. Someone's just going to look at that and go, well, that's not right.
It's totally, and those that idea of practicals, which is the lights you see in a scene that are emitting light but aren't necessarily the lights in the scene lighting the scene. Those are really important to match. So I had a scene that I brought a lamp in yesterday to shoot a desk type scene, and I have an incandescent bulb for it, and my lights, I was using the daylight lights, couldn't shoot them together. It didn't look right, and my hard lights were not bicolor, so I just had to ditch the lamp because it just wasn't working. I probably could have found a bulb that matched or something like that if it was actually a bigger production or something. But this was just kind of on a whim. But you have to match that color temperature, and that the physics of light is really important to pay attention to, because you could have a really bright light, but it won't illuminate your scene. unless it's powerful enough and can be focused. So, we talk about hard and soft light, which I've talked about a little bit. The big difference is, on a cloudy day, the sun is a soft light. On a midsummer day when no clouds, well, at least in California, it's midsummer, but that would be a hard light. And hard lights cast dark, sharp shadows. It's the ones you do hand puppets with, right? That's a hard light, whereas a soft light's going to have diffused shadows, and they're going to be softer. It used to be everything was a hard light, and you used a modifier. You used something to diffuse that light. So you put something in front of it so that it made the light source from a larger area. And that's really the big difference. Is a hard light is a smaller directionality than the idea of broad, soft light.
Right. So we talked about color temperature a few minutes ago, and color temperature to me has always been kind of confusing in like trying to figure out like what does that actually mean. Mm-hmm. So everyone, well, I don't want to say everyone, a lot of people know the actual temperatures themselves and how they relate to the color of light. So you can do this if you're unfamiliar with this. You can go down to Home Depot or something and validate this, but generally, there's this range of anywhere between 2,700 to 6,500, which is the typical spectrum of color temperatures for light. 2,700 is a very warm light, like a candle would emit. Yeah. And it's very, orangish. And 6,500 is very blue, like the sun would emit. And a lot of people think of the sun like, oh, that's red. That's yellow. What's going on?
Yellow, yeah, right.
What are you talking about, blue? Well, actually, it is blue.
Think of when you leave a movie and you go out of that theater, that when you go out, if you don't have sunglasses, all of a sudden you're exposed to the bright outside. It's blue. For a second, your brain is going to see everything a little blue.
Yeah.
And that's the same idea. Our eyes are just super good at adjusting those color temperatures. So for us, it's really smooth going from indoors to outdoors.
Yeah, you also see this a lot if you ever look at amateur video and it's like shot inside someone's house. And then they sort of take the camera and they pan a little bit, and there's a window, and it's just like bright blue outside.
Yeah.
It's because the sunlight's blue. But they're measuring Kelvin. So when we're talking about 2,700 or 6,500, we're talking about degrees Kelvin, which
not Calvin like Calvin and Hobbes, but Kelvin with a K.
Like the name of the guy I think that invented this measurement. So it's like you can look at 2,700 degrees, like that's freaking hot. Like, does something have to be 2,700 degrees in order to emit this color light? Well, not really. This is the really confusing part.
This is color temperature, not temperature.
Yeah,
What would that be? Other heat temperature?
Yeah, exactly. Which Kelvin is a measurement of heat. So here's the really confusing part: is that lights that emit warm color temperature, so 2,700, 3,200. Are very hot. Put your hand on a candle and you're going to burn your hand. If you use a tungsten light, the type of light that emits 3,200 degree Kelvin, it's very hot, so much so that after you turn it off, you got to let it sit there for 30 minutes or an hour before you can handle it.
Yeah.
Whereas a light that emits very high color temperature, 5,600, is typically an LED, and it's not hot. You can pick it up while it's on, and you're not going to burn your hand. So, like, what's going on here? What
about an LED that does tungsten?
Well, that's an extra trick because there's a filter on it, right? Each diode has a little color. That's the confusing part. So, why is it that a light is hotter when the color temperature is colder? And this is the part that is really difficult at least was for me to wrap my mind around it, which is that these temperatures are not theoretical, but they're a representation of something that might happen in a theoretical world. And it has to do with a black body, which is an idealized piece of matter that is pure black, as in if light lands on it, it absorbs all of it. And if you heat up this black body, it starts to glow. And at these different heat points, the color of the glow changes. So as it heats up to 2,700 degrees, it's going to emit this warm light, and as it heats up to 5,600 degrees or 6,500 degrees, it's going to emit this blue light.
Which is different than like the idea of your fireplace or anything else. That usually the more blue the flame on the fire, actually the hotter the fire. and it has the same spectrum from red to blue with green in the middle. But the big thing about it is none of this would really matter if we didn't have to tell the camera what color white is. And so, it's all about setting white balance on your camera. The reason why the color temperatures matter is because what you're trying to do is say, hey, camera, this color, this degree, this temperature right here is what white is. So see every other color in response to what white is. And I remember the first time, or when I was learning how to shoot, that I was at a camp and we shot people all the time. I was going indoors and outdoors, so I was having to set my white balance all the time. And this is if you're going indoors and outdoors, outside sun is not always 5600K, or it could be 9700K, it could be 4700K. It depends on the day, right? Where the sun is, the amount of clouds, all the rest. So you want to set your white balance for that color for the time. So I would just use the back of people's shirts, and I was like, oh, they're white shirt. Except for sometimes, when you just walked outside, like I was saying from the movie, your color of your eyes doesn't look right, and you white balance on a shirt that's just slightly blue. And all of a sudden, all your shots look really weird. And it's the same thing. I mean, you try this at home. If you have a camera that you can set the white balance, try different whites and see how it affects. And a big trick to dealing with multicolor lights when you're in a situation where you don't have control over the color temperature is trying to get a white card that kind of gets a little bit of both, so that you can set the white balance somewhere in between, so it's not as apparent that outside the window is bright blue or that your lights are really warm. Now, if you have, of course, the biggest contrast between the lightest, the tungsten and daylight, you're going to see a color shift there. But that it's really important to have your camera see those colors properly, because really the thing that has the most color variance that we pay attention to is skin. Skin tone is, one, very different from person to person, but also very different just on your body, from the places where my wrinkles are that are darker to the tips of my fingers, my face that are redder. There's quite a spectrum of color there, and will look really funny if the color isn't proper. And so that's really one of the biggest reasons why you'll want to really pay attention to that color temperature, is because you could have really nice lights, and if your white balance isn't set properly, the skin tones and things are going to look funny. And we're not talking about quality of lights. I don't think so much in this podcast, but quality of light makes a big difference. And it's one of those things that you just can't put your finger on. You'll shoot with the light and be like, man, everything looked beautiful under that light. And then you'll shoot with another light and be like, everything looks kind of green. I don't know if I like it, and it really comes to the quality of the light, but that's advanced lighting. So
short story, little anecdote. You mentioned setting white balance on people's shirts. So, actually, you don't really need to do this these days, because you can dial in the white balance to whatever you want. But one of the ways that you can set a white balance, obviously, is to fill the frame of your shot with white, and then hold a button down and say, this is white. You're telling your camera, what you're seeing now is white, so set that appropriately, and then it sets. Well, I used to do the shirt thing, too. Like, you find someone with a white shirt on, and ideally you find someone with a white shirt on that they don't have a bunch of print on the shirt. And you fill the frame, you hit the button. White. Well, I stopped doing this shortly after, because I was a high school student shooting like at a football game, and normally I keep a white card in my pocket, folded up piece of paper, and I could hold it up and do it that way. And I was like, oh crap, I forgot my white card, and I really need to set this white balance. So I'm like, quick, I need to find someone with a white shirt on. And so some stranger was just around. I'm like, white shirt, great. So I snuck up behind them. They had blank, their back of their shirt was blank. And I was like, oh, I got to get close, because, I couldn't zoom in just right. And it was right behind them, holding the camera up, pressing the button, and they spun around right at that moment. Like, what are you doing, you creep? Get away from me with that camera. Thanks, Haley.
Yeah. Let's see, that's it.
Anyways, no more shirt white balancing for me.
When it comes to shooting video in public, you get tunnel vision to getting your shot. And so you will definitely do things that are if someone was watching you, I don't know, all the strange contortions I've gotten my body into to get the shot, because you're just thinking about the shot, and there's someone watching you, and it's that's some funny parkour, kid. You all sorts of. But I remember getting caught white balancing, and it was person shirt, wasn't thinking about it. I'm zooming in on the chest of a person,
a
female, and it wasn't for the creepy reason, but sure didn't look like
Crickets
it.
Again.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh man. And so, you got to be aware. And that's why a lot of times when you're like documentary shooting and that kind of thing, you'll have a handler to help you, one, not get hit by a car or, get into situations where you shouldn't be because you're just paying attention to the shot. And so, you can get somewhat in tunnel vision. And I'm really bold when it comes to shooting. I don't mind getting right up into something if I feel like it. I mean, we shot the sprint car races here in town, and like I had to have someone holding me so I wouldn't walk into the race course or, on the racetrack and die. But, really all this has to do with lighting. So,
you got to do boring.
Let's get boring. So we're talking about YouTube lighting, and I think the really interesting thing is this is the place where I see so many more ring lights than I do other things. And this is a round light and it's really easy to tell because typically when you see someone's pupils or their eyes, they have like a beautiful little circle.
Yeah, by the way, the manufacturer of those lights, they talk about how wonderful that little circle is. Maybe it's because I'm just like in it and I know that, that's just the ring light reflecting. Is it really beautiful? Like that circle?
It's
I think it's unnatural, but it for some things, it draws your eye to it, makes your eyes glisten a little different.
Definitely the little specular highlight that you get on your eyes from a light is nice. It's a very beautiful look, but the ring specifically, I don't know.
The first time I saw that kind of lighting was for all these cut-ins for the World Series of Poker, and they used to have really amazing production, and they did these really cool truck shots going dollying into a person, and they had a ring light on the camera and there was no other lights, so the subject was completely dark to the camera moving into them, but the light was on the camera, so then all of a sudden they were lit because you got the camera closer to them, and then of course they're all wearing sunglasses like they as poker players, so they all looked really tough, and it was one of the first times I ever saw those ring lights, and I was like, oh, that's really neat, but it's just a gimmick. I mean, it's just it's neat. It looks nice in those situations. I think beauty vlogs, people that are doing doing makeup, or you're looking at someone, it's something interesting to look at or whatever. And it is nice because it's a light coming from the perspective of the camera, so it's likely you're not going to have funny, unless you're shooting from a strange angle, you're going to have funny shadows or anything like that. It's a lot better than the light that they use a lot of times, like on the news. That's like on top of the camera, just a big old bright hard light that they're just trying to get enough light so they can get the interview at night of the person that just got mugged or whatever. So it's nice there, but when it comes to just lighting up your scene, well, I like to do this watching YouTubers because you can always catch in their eyes where their lights are, or where there'll be a mirror somewhere and you'll be able to see it, or something like that, and it's fun to try to, okay, how are they lighting their scene, or like in the way of like the number one YouTuber, he doesn't, PewDiePie does not know how to...
T-Series?
Yeah, T-Series, yeah. T-Series knows how to light because they're actually a company. But
yeah, so we must be talking about the number two.
Yeah, number two.
Yes.
Yeah, well, he's the number one individual YouTuber. Yeah. Anyway, but he doesn't do lighting. He doesn't care, and people give him a hard time about his camera being blurry. He doesn't care. He still gets views, and why would you care if he still got views? Well, I'd care because I just like making things look good, but
ring lights are just so convenient, I feel like,
Totally.
for YouTubers, and they're so available now, especially like on Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
I know there's so many affordable options, especially for YouTubers who are just starting out, so I feel like
There's
like one of the easy go-to options.
There's a lot of cheap, affordable lights, especially Amazon's, of course, the place to find cheap, affordable things, but that like China makes a lot of LEDs and stuff like that, so you can get. I think behind Mike, actually you can't see it, but it's a moon, or it looks like a moon. It's a globe, and it's got a light in it, and it emits, and guarantee you it's some kind of crummy LED that's inside it. I've seen strip lights, lots of accent lights and stuff, because they can make them, and if they're not really high quality, they can be really cheap. High quality LEDs are special and good lighting, but if you're using them as like a color, they're really easy to do. But you can find a 3-piece lighting kit on Amazon for $150. You'll be able to dim. You might not be able to get bicolor, so you might not be able to change the color temperature, but you at least can dim it and bright without changing the color temperature, which like on a tungsten, like a light that's actually an incandescent bulb, if you actually lower the amperage it's going to it, its actual color temperature is going to go down. Fun fact on incandescent light bulbs, a lot of people, they'll burst and you don't want to touch them. And the reason why is the grease or the oil on your hand gets on the bulb, and because they get so hot, they'll boil that oil from your hand and then burn the light bulb out. So it's an interesting thing. It's not like from you touching it, but it's from the oils off your hands and the heat coming together. But cheap lights, it used to be tungsten all day long. You get a little small kit. I don't know anyone that shoots with tungsten unless they just don't have enough money to buy it, because they are so
LEDs
hot.
Are so cheap now too. So
they're so cheap. And they're low power, so you can find them battery powered.
They're
dimmable and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it just took a lot to do this with incandescent.
Can you imagine all these beauty vloggers, who are now spending like $100 or something for a nice ring light, instead spending $100 on one of the old tungstens that we used to shoot, in college.
Like 250.
Yeah, they've got the 1,000-watt thing in the corner of the room.
This is like beyond my time. I have no idea what we're talking about.
see.
Thanks for reminding it how old this is.
Sorry.
I would say these lights are very much like the KC lights on a big truck that are just meant to illuminate. They're just bright and.
I mean, you could shape them with the right tools.
It was definitely more harder. Well, dimming lights are just amazing. I mean, if you don't have space to back your light off and it's just a constant brightness, it's difficult. Like, what do you just gotta point it in a different direction or something. It's hard to control that light. So just being able to dim the light without changing the color temperature is a huge tool that is just amazing to have. And then the idea of changing colors. I mean, there's just so many times where you'll be in a room that's, maybe it's fluorescent light bulbs or fluorescent tubes or whatever, and those are all usually green around 4,000, 4,200 Kelvin. That you could probably dial those lights down so that you can just use them. Now, usually fluorescent lights cycle, so you get kind of a weird cycle thing that'll happen with your camera if the bulbs are old, or the ballasts of the lights are old. You'll get the same kind of thing that when you look at a CRT old tube monitor.
Yeah, you get that with strobe. The banding.
Yeah, the banding that's there. That's no good. But I would have to say, well, since I started working for Videomaker, a lot of the times I have the right light for the tool, I have the right light for the job, and I have the right space to set it up. That's rare. That's because I have a studio to work in. If you're shooting out in the world, you're working with what you got, and so it's about trying to use it to your best ability, and technique is going to be the thing that's going to be able to elevate your ability, because just knowing that a ring light looks nicer than an incandescent light sitting on the top here, that's going to, just choosing the right light for the job is going to be a bigger benefit than fighting it. I mean, I can only imagine if you gave a kit like that to someone that's used to using a ring light or that kind of setup, they probably wouldn't know what to do. They just are lucky they're using tools that work well for their content type.
So we've kind of bounced all over the place here, but I do have one more physics-related tip for everyone, which it took me longer than I care to admit to learn this. But sometimes you'll get a light and you'll wonder to yourself, like, why do some lights provide like nice soft shadows and it looks really pleasing on skin tones, and others, like, you get these really hard, sharp lines in the shadows? And the reason is it has to do with the size of the light source relative to the size of the subject. So if you have a flashlight and you point it at someone, like a little LED flashlight, the light point in this flashlight is going to be like, it's like a little LED diode inside of a 1-inch cone, essentially. So the light source is like 1 inch in diameter, compared to a person's face, which is like 6 to 8 inches or something in diameter. And so you're guaranteed you're going to get these sharp shadows across their nose and their eyebrows and all this other stuff. Whereas if you have a big light source, like an LED, like one of these 1x1s is pretty big, bigger than someone's face, but you could go even bigger than that, a big soft box that's like 3x3. The bigger that light source is compared to the subject, the softer it's going to be. You're going to get light that lands and sort of wraps around from a number of different angles, which is also why the sun has such sharp angles. And you might think, well, the sun is really big. It's bigger than me. Why does it have such sharp shadows? And it really is the relative size. So the sun is big, but it's also like, pop quiz, how far away from the sun is the Earth?
It's like 45-minute drive or something.
Okay, yeah, so it's really far away. It's like at least 30 miles away.
Yeah, at least 30 miles. That's why we stay away.
And so, it's like a pinpoint in the sky relative to, us standing here on Earth. So that's why we get these sharp shadows. So there's probably some math involved in the angle of the rays. But at any rate, if you want nice soft shadows, get a big source of light. That's why standing next to a window with not the sun coming directly through the window, but the sun just like hitting things outside, and coming in naturally through the window gives you a nice soft light, because the window itself is a source of light, and it's huge compared to a person.
So here's something somewhat related to that, is the term micro shadows. So if you have a bunch of small light sources, like a 1x1 light that has 300 diodes in it that are all lit up. It's really, in essence, 300 lights that are working together. They're really close, but they're not right on top of each other. There is space between them. Because of that, you have different angles of your shadows. So and I'm sure, I think I've seen this a lot of times in like baseball fields, because they have so many lights coming from different directions. You can stand there and you could have shadows like in a whole 360 degrees around you, and you see of yourself, just because light's coming from every direction. And micro shadows are all about the idea that the light's not getting diffused enough before it's getting to you, so you're actually seeing shadows from each one of those lights. So a lot of LEDs, we actually have two of them up here that you can actually see the diodes, and if we brought that out, you could see that they actually at a certain distance, the further you get, the more they overlap and you don't get the shadows, but that you start getting those micro shadows, and it's definitely something to pay attention to when you're paying a good amount of money for lights, because it's a really big detriment to shooting faces and stuff if you have like a weird like 5 shadow nose or something. It just doesn't work really very well.
So we wanted to talk about a lot of other things in this podcast.
Totally.
I think we got through half of it.
Yep.
And our time's up. So I guess we're going to have to do lighting part 2. There was another topic we discussed recently, and we hardly scratched the surface. We were going to come back to it, and I forgot what that one was.
You're going to have to listen to all the podcasts and find out.
There's
36 or 35 now.
This
35.
is number 35.
I think there's like 38 total, but 3 of them we won't let the world hear.
Yeah, we got to do, we're coming up on 50. We should probably do something crazy. Ice bucket challenge for Chris.
For me.
Ice bucket challenge.
Yeah.
That's so dated now.
I just want to dump a bucket of ice.
Yeah, he's trying to find some. We're going to slime Chris.
Oh, yeah, slime. Speaking of dated, right?
Dated, yeah.
I remember Slime.
Slime
Time Live.
On Nickelodeon?
Yeah.
So it actually originated on You Can't Do This on Television.
Yeah, that's right.
And Alanis Morissette was one of the people on the show. It was a Canadian show, and they dreamt green oatmeal on people.
That was the original
and that was
slime?
the original slime. And then Nickelodeon went really big, and it was like in shows and all that kind of thing. And that's what turned into whatever thing you're talking about.
Does anyone? You don't remember? This is before you were born.
Oh, okay.
Back in the olden days when it was black
Chris,
and white.
do you remember what it was that you had to do on You Can't Do This on Television to get slimed?
I don't know.
I don't know. If you say I don't know, you get slimed.
Yeah. So if you didn't know something.
Oh.
That, I remember something about don't encourage your father or something like that, and I can't remember.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, it was like it's telling bad jokes, and it's like laughing at your dad's bad jokes. Don't encourage your father.
Man, that was a cool show.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
That was OG Nickelodeon. Like literally, I think it was like one of the first series on that channel.
It's like from the early '80s. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, we should call it there, eh?
We should.
And we got to come back. We're going to come back on another episode. We wanted to go through all the different lighting technologies, talk about the difference between tungsten and LED and fluorescent and HMI. We want to talk about all the different types of like grip gear you can get, which there is tons and tons of.
Way to control light and everything.
Yeah.
There's lighting is more complex than you might think, and it's one of those things that like it doesn't get appreciated unless someone tells you to look at it, because it's not supposed to be noticed.
The one thing that I would like to learn more about myself, which maybe I could research before the next one, is finding the ideal natural light. I have seen these pro photographers.
Golden hour.
Yeah, golden hour helps big
Golden
time.
hour. Yeah.
But Chris, you may have encountered this on some of these press junkets where we'll work with some like pro, like world-class photographer, and they talk about finding the light, and they'll have a model there. And they're like, okay, and they're just like looking around some random location. They're like, okay, where can we find the light here? And they'll take this model and they'll put him, they're like, okay, stand here, turn this way, look this way. And they'll take a picture, and it's like the most beautiful glamour shot you've ever seen. Yeah,
totally. I have been around that, and it's really awesome to get to watch them. Usually it's one of those photographers that you do not interrupt while they're doing stuff. Like, you just watch them do that. Otherwise, they'd be a tyrant. I've had a few that were like, let me do my magic and leave me alone while I'm doing this. You can watch from afar, but no stealing my shot, which is really coveted. But the big thing now is that there's so many ways to do it in post. With Lightroom, when you're doing photos, you can relight a whole scene way differently. Birdman, or is it Birdman? Is that the movie that's supposed to be one big long cut?
Yeah, with Michael Keaton.
I went to a Maya presentation, and they used that movie to show one of the scenes that had 300 different secondary color grades on the scene just to deal with the light in the scene, to change it the way the film the director wanted. And so even when you see these things that looks like so effortless and all that kind of stuff, it's usually BS. It's usually no, they spent a lot of time and were very deliberate, and they wanted it to seem like they didn't. It reminds me of all the reality shows. They work so hard to make it seem like it's real, but in reality, someone's over there feeding them all booze so they all freak out and make good TV. So it's just not real. I don't know if anybody thinks reality TV is real anymore, but
I think my mom thinks it's real.
Well, you watch like Survivor or those kinds of things, like you'd think, it's a game show, but it's like, no, it's still being all manipulated.
Yeah. Okay, call it there, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching or listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks everyone for listening. For Haley LaPlante and Chris Monlux and everyone here at Videomaker, I'm Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker podcast. We'll catch you next time.